Hi, I'm Greg Gutfeld with Katie Pavlich, Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, and a peanut shell as her bike helmet. Dana Perino, the 5. Last night, President Trump tweeted a reminder to Iran not to mess with us. It was in all caps, showing the world that he's not afraid to go all caps. What's next? If you listen to the media, it has to be war. Fact is, Trump was just responding to the Iranian president who warned us about a mother of all wars. Remember the last guy who said that? Yet, predictably, the media freaks out, forgetting that whole North Korea thing, which followed this same pattern. So forgive me if, unlike CNN, I'm not pulling my hair out. So I'll take a war of words over a war of worlds. Now, the media claims this tweet's a distraction from last week's summit. Yet how did that summit hurt Trump? For all the media shaming, he's at 45% approval. That's his highest so far. And we're happier with the country's direction than any time in the last 8 years. This confuses the media as they keep saying that Trump is the worst thing to ever happen since The View. Maybe because they've cried wolf so many times, even Blitzer ignores it. It's the gulf between what the media wants to matter and what actually matters. According to Gallup, in terms of importance to voters, the Russia collusion story rated so small it could barely be measured. It's under 1%. To Americans, Jesse's new haircut mattered more. And it's not even a good haircut. I mean, look at it. Look at it. It's bad. Very bad. Anyway, now the media will say that the tweet means we're all doomed. Not really. It's the mullahs who should be nervous. Meanwhile, on CNN, it's part 200 of the collusion follies. On MSNBC, a primetime end of the world special. On ABC, deep political analysis with Joy. NBC, Lester Holt. And on CBS, some guy. My advice, keep it here. All right, Dana, we're seeing an evolution in tweeting, all caps. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
It didn't start as all caps, but the crescendo.
Yes.
All caps, like he really means it.
Yes.
One thing I thought back to was in April of 2009, I think is when the Green Revolution happened in Iran. That's when the people rose up.
Yeah.
They wanted help from the United States. They did not get it. And so, here we are in 2018. Not that help could have definitely changed things, but they needed more help than they deserved. But I remember at the time, that was really started by Twitter.
Right.
And people on the ground were doing, and the mullahs had no idea what Twitter was. And boy, have things changed, because now they're actually having tweet wars with the president, which can build friendships, because we started out that way.
That's exactly how it starts.
Do you remember?
You and me?
Yes, we had a Twitter war.
Really?
And then I won it. But the other thing is, I would say, I am happy to have the United States and the world talk about Iran for a week.
Yeah.
Because we've talked about Russia a ton. We've talked about North Korea a ton. Meanwhile, Iran does a lot of bad things all around the world, and I think that they're time to call them out on it. I think the other reason they're doing this is that the snapback sanctions happen in 2 weeks, and so the mullahs are about to feel the squeeze.
The mullahs are worried. All right, Juan, isn't this a deja tweet? This is exactly how he began with the fire and fury with North Korea, and the next thing you know, Kim Jong-un is his best pal.
Yeah, that's still apparently he's very irritated that nothing's come of that.
Yes.
Of those talks with Kim Jong-un.
Right.
But I will say this, to me, I'm still struck by the idea he is still among, even though his numbers bumped up in the Wall Street Journal poll to 45%, as you pointed out, still among the lowest of all modern presidents in terms of approval. And I think that when we think about Helsinki and Putin, it's because the Republican base is like a cult with Donald Trump. They just don't budge. They don't care. It doesn't matter to them. I was struck, though, by the whole media. See, I see you and Dana saying, oh, it's good. We need to talk about it around. They're doing this. And I think to myself, I think Donald Trump is outfoxing everybody, because what he's doing is saying, let's talk about NFL players.
But we're not. We're talking about Iran.
Yeah. No, let's talk about Iran. Let's talk about the Federal Reserve raising interest rates. Let's talk about the FBI break into Cohen's office. Let's talk about tariffs on China. Let's talk about anything.
Nobody talks about that. He talks about that anyway. I don't think he cares. But I also don't think he thinks Helsinki was that big of a deal. Like most of America, Jesse, most of America is more interested with your strange haircut.
My mother told me to stop talking about my hair, so I'm going to ignore that insult, Greg. I will say this, though. The same Democrats upset with Donald Trump for tweeting all in caps sent Iran billions all in cash.
Oh.
Juan. I'm looking at you.
Well, I'll tell you what I think about that in a minute.
And the caps, it's like, was it Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly, carry a big stick? He speaks loudly and carries a big stick. And that's fine. I think what he's trying to do is say, we're going to respond when you're going to talk trash. He's an ultimate trash talker. And Iran is Putin's puppet.
Yeah.
And he's rhetorically blasting Iran, and he's actually bombing their other puppet, Syria. Right. So how is he in cahoots with the Russians?
Such a great.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Katie, this has to do with Russia in a way, I would, and with Syria.
It has to do with the Middle East as a whole. It has to do with foreign policy as a whole.
Afghanistan.
And Afghanistan. Right. There is now this restructuring going on of the Middle East when it comes to everybody essentially becoming allies in a little bit of a way to go against Iran. And when you look at what is being reported as Juan just tried to distract back to with all these other topics that we're not discussing right now, there are very serious things going on in Iran. And although we've been focused on other topics on the surface level with the media in the United States, there are very serious consequences to what could happen there. Inflation is 159% in that country. A third of the Iranian youth are unemployed. And the Iranian regime now is facing the consequences of using all of the money they've been getting from the United States, from the Europeans, and they're spending it on terrorism. And the people there have been protesting for years now because they know that. And if you look at the speech that Secretary Pompeo gave at the Reagan Library, it is very clear that they are not saying we want regime change, but based on the language of standing with the people, talking about maybe putting more sanctions on, threatening back when Iran, by the way, threatens us first, and dealing with the problem that, quite frankly, President Obama did not handle very well.
I think the venue of the speech was important too.
The Reagan Library?
Yeah, the Reagan Library.
I'll be there in a few weeks.
On purpose. I mean, yours will be as impactful.
I think I'd be.
I'm sure that the Iranians
the Middle East depends on it, Greg.
I can change the world. By the way, I have to point out that the Iranian guy also said what's possible is the mother of all peace. Do you think that there was
that's why I think that I absolutely believe that President Trump will say, why don't we just meet?
Yeah.
Okay, and then imagine when the Republicans lost their minds because Obama was like, maybe I should talk to them. Like, don't you dare do that.
Didn't he try to meet him before already?
I think there was letters. Right?
Yeah, a lot of letters. That's it. Here's I want to play a sound on tape from a network. Was it CNN?
Yeah, double N.
They're still a network, right?
Yeah, they are. They're still around. They're hanging by a thread, though. It's about their wag the dog scenario, that this is actually a distraction. Roll it, please.
I don't want to go full wag the dog. But, I mean, we know that the president's strategy.
It's a half wag.
I mean,
it's a half wag. It goes to here, not to there. It's very subtle wag.
The president's strategy, he's employed it over and over. We would be foolish not to absorb it and recognize it. When he's embarrassed, as he was last week, he always looks for a distraction.
I don't buy this because he wasn't embarrassed.
This is the worst wag the dog ever. I mean, Helsinki happened a week ago, and he's been doubling down on Helsinki for a week.
He ordered up another summit.
I know. He should have done this last week if he really wanted to do this. It's also, Rich, talking about wagging the dog with Democrats. I think it was Bill Clinton who bombed an aspirin factory during the Lewinsky testimony. So I think they know a little bit about wagging the dog.
Oh, so in other words, you're not denying that that's exactly what he's doing.
No, if he had wagged it, it would have been a week ago.
I actually think that it all is in the lead up to these sanctions that are going to go back into place on August 6th, which is only like 12 days away. I think that it's the lead up to that so that people aren't surprised by when the president says we're snapping back these sanctions.
I tell you what, the big snapback to my mind is when he says he was walking back at the end of last week, I didn't mean to say that the Russians weren't responsible for interference. Sunday night he says this whole thing is a hoax.
Oh,
this
no.
Russian
well,
thing
now
is
they
a hoax.
explained that the actual what he's saying when he says hoax. Sarah Sanders said today what he means is that the accusation of collusion, that's the hoax.
So would or wouldn't? You know what I mean? It's always like something, but he just keeps shifting it, and for some reason it satisfies the GOP.
Well, I guess it depends what the meaning of is.
Oh, yeah, there you go. But the Republicans in the House and the Senate, they're so afraid of the Republicans who march in lockstep to Trump that they are biting their tongues. But then you see people come out.
But they do bite their tongues on Russia.
Oh, they do, big time.
This is nothing. Juan, it's nothing compared to the cult of Obama. Let's face it.
For 8 years, the media did nothing
but Obama's bidding. So please.
Yeah. I work at Fox News. I know we weren't doing Obama's bidding. I'll tell you that.
Well, look, as going back to Dana's point, which is the overall construct of how we're moving forward on Iran. We went through the Iran deal. President Trump got rid of it. There are going to be consequences moving forward for how the administration deals with the regime. And they are obviously looking at the idea of Iran not being able to sustain economically any kind of sanctions or further pressure the United States puts on them, because it will lead to regime change, which the U.S. is not officially pushing for, but based on the things that have been said, the pressure that's been put on. Pompeo calling out the leaders by name and saying that they're hypocritical holy men, and tweeting in Farsi to the activists on the ground there. This is an overall strategy for the administration. It's not just a distraction from Russia, because we've been dealing with this even before Trump became president on the campaign trail.
Does anybody like the mullahs in Iran? I mean, the people. I mean, how much sway do they have?
Well, I think that with the military, right?
Yeah.
So that they get the goodies, right? And so if you're,
Yeah.
it's just a typical dictatorial regime. But I think the other thing that we forget is that in Afghanistan and in Iraq in particular, Iraq is actually doing much better from a law and governance standpoint, but Iran is causing additional problems, and they're moving into Afghanistan.
And I think you forget, though, that there's a counter to the U.S. sanctions. I think U.S. sanctions, Katie, are going to have cause some pain for the Iranians. But don't forget, the other parties in what was a 6-party agreement on the Iranian deal are still in it, still doing business.
And they're propping up a terrorist regime that funds more terrorism around the world.
But I'm not arguing that point with you. I would agree that they are terrorists. But I would say this, that the U.S., by the United States acting unilaterally, we are becoming more isolated and weaker on the world stage. We should have our allies with us going against the Iranians. We shouldn't be separated out so that we can be identified by the mullahs as just the big bad Americans who think they're going to run the world.
Okay, so do you think the president's tweet was strong or weak?
I think it was a distraction from all his trouble with the Russians and Helsinki.
So wait, we want to pull back, yet we want to run the world.
No.
How is that possible?
Because we talk.
It's leading from behind. That's what he's trying to do. Lead from behind.
If he was that subtle, I would tip my cap to him.
You'll be tipping your cap soon. All right, the president looking to strip security clearances from top anti-Trump Obama intel officials. That's the latest next.
President Trump's threatening to pull the security clearances of several former top Obama intelligence officials, including James Comey, John Brennan, James Clapper, Andrew McCabe, Susan Rice, and Michael Hayden. The White House accusing them of politicizing or monetizing their former positions and making baseless claims about President Trump. Here are just some recent examples of their attacks.
What Mr. Trump did yesterday was to betray the women and men of the FBI, the CIA, NSA, and others, and to betray the American public. And that's why I use the term that this is nothing short of treasonous.
I really do wonder whether the Russians have something on him.
The policies that this president has pursued globally have served Vladimir Putin's interests.
I think he's morally unfit to be president.
Wow. All right, so Dana, will this actually have an impact on these players at all, or is this kind of like a public humiliation?
I think it's the latter, like a political, retaliation for retaliation. Like if any of them were actually going back to the agency and getting a security briefing and then using that knowledge to get money off of it inappropriately, that would be a violation that the Department of Justice should look into. I don't think that's actually the accusation being made here. I'm assuming that it's because they've gone out and done books and had TV contracts or things or get speeches, and people think they know things. Like McCabe's not a good example because his security clearance was deactivated when he was let go from the FBI. Hayden tweeted that he has never actually gone back and had a security briefing. I'm assuming that the Trump officials are actually not briefing people like Susan Rice and Clapper and Brennan. So I think that it's a little bit looks like political retaliation. It's probably good for fodder, but the practical result, not much.
Great for fodder, right, Greg?
I'm a big fan of fodder. This just dropped into our show. How does Brennan have a security clearance? A guy is as trustworthy as Jesse's barber. But I agree with you, Dana. This really is same to you, but more of it. It's like, okay, so you're saying we're colluding?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to say you're colluding. It's like tic-tac-toe. It's like Rochambeau. Everybody's like coming at each other. But I do agree that I think that you can disagree with the administration, but I think they've ventured into undermining it. Right?
Yeah.
They have. I mean, come on. When you call the president a traitor, Teresa, you're undermining it. Take away his clearance. Debrief him.
What if you're speaking the truth?
What? It doesn't matter.
I think that if they're not, but even if they get if even this happens to them, I don't think they're going to change anything that they say.
Yeah.
Well, no, but the thing is, and I mean, you made all the key points. They're not actually being briefed. I mean, these people were in the intelligence community. So I think this fits into a narrative from President Trump that would say, these are the citizens of the deep state, and they hate me. They've been trying to beat me during the campaign. They're still trying to undermine me. The problem with the argument is, one, if you really want to know somebody who is up to dirty deeds with actual intelligence, what about Michael Flynn? That was your national security advisor, Mr. President. And secondly, hey, what about people like Will Hurd, who was a CIA agent now in the Congress, a Republican, who says he thinks that you are being used by President Putin? What about, people like Brian Fitzpatrick, Mike Rogers? These are good Republicans who say something odd is going on between the Russians and President Trump.
Well, it's more than just, retribution against what you call the deep state, Juan. Some of the things that they've said have been outrageous, as Greg mentioned. But also, now that you have the FISA warrant of Carter Page released, Katie, that showed extreme abuse of the system. They did not disclose that it was funded by the DNC. Did not disclose it was funded by Hillary. It did not want.
That's not true.
And this was never verified at all. Any of this information.
This is not true, America.
Juan, I read the whole thing. Did you?
Yes.
No.
Yes, I saw. In fact, not only that, I had to discuss it on Fox News Sunday with people like.
Was the dossier the primary element in obtaining the warrant,
right
Juan?
There that the dossier
The number
was
one
funded.
element on the dossier was right there in front of the judge. They did not disclose it was funded by Hillary.
They said it was funded by his political opponents, Jesse.
It was funded by a candidate,
Oh my
Juan.
gosh! Yeah, you'd have to
candidate.
guess. Yeah, you'd have to guess.
And it was buried in a footnote.
In that
Juan.
case, did you read it and see that it didn't even name Donald Trump? He's just candidate one who becomes president. Did
Juan,
you notice that?
If you're going to lie to a FISA judge and
lie
put
to a FISA judge.
unverifiable information, that's perjury.
So you think
and if you want to be okay with perjury, that's fine.
You think the FBI lied to the FISA judges?
We actually have evidence that that's the case. Because you're not allowed to put unverified information on a warrant application.
4 Republican FISA judges who saw repeated requests from the FBI and granted them all.
And has he been indicted for anything? Is he a Russian agent, Juan?
I think he's cooperating.
I don't think so.
I think they're waiting.
Don't think so. Carter Page doesn't really strike me as a really brilliant.
That is the real question.
I'm with you, Katie.
I mean, if Carter Page has a security clearance, it must be revoked immediately.
Take it back.
But getting back to that topic of security clearances, the system for security clearances actually needs to be cleaned up significantly. I think there are valid questions about why senior government officials get to keep their security clearances. And when you look at what the administration is accusing these former officials, 2 of them who worked for Trump, Comey and McCabe, of doing in terms of politicizing this, they see it as an interference with the nation's business, an interference of the office of the presidency. And if you look at just the Twitter feed of John Brennan, James Clapper, Susan Rice, they're not just talking about disagreements in terms of foreign policy. They're talking about why aren't Republicans speaking out? Susan Rice is tweeting all about getting out the vote against Republicans. James Comey just this week saying if you want to save America, you have to vote for Democrats in the fall. So there is a question about whether people who want to engage in those kinds of politics really should have access to top secret information at the highest levels of our government when they may not be getting briefed directly by the administration, but they could still be talking to people inside of those agencies and getting information that they then use to further their political goals.
I think the point here is that they have credibility and that people might listen to them.
James Clapper has
Clapper and Brennan have a ton of credibility.
I think because
the guy lied to the American public
because he
repeatedly?
was director of national intelligence, because he was.
And he lied under oath.
I'm just telling you, I think
Americans.
that Trump wants to undermine the entire intelligence community.
Well, they did that to
protect
themselves.
himself.
The media anointing a new frontrunner to take on President Trump in 2020. Does his potential opponent stand a chance? Find out next.
Well, Democrats still searching for their new leader and the person to take on Donald Trump in 2020. Elizabeth Warren, the senator, is featured on the cover of the latest issue of New York Magazine. She's being billed as the current Democratic frontrunner, also leader of the persistence. Meanwhile, in my latest column in The Hill, I'm arguing that Democrats should be focusing on white working class voters to defeat Donald Trump. I'm going to go to a white working class. Oh, you're not working class. I forgot. A white rich voter. I'm sorry, Mr. Waters.
Richer now the Trump tax cuts kicked in.
Oh, yeah?
Not in New York.
Yeah.
Listen to the grumbling. There's grumbling at the table.
I'm for the.
Okay, Jesse.
Yes.
So here's the thing. Elizabeth Warren on the cover. Elizabeth Warren stands for single-payer health care, right? Elizabeth Warren wants to help young people who have heavy tuition debt coming out of college. She thinks a minimum wage hike would be a good idea.
Yeah.
How do you, as a white working-class American, feel about this?
Listen, I think she's got a good shot at getting the nomination.
Do you
I
really?
think the base likes her. I think she can excite a crowd. She's younger than Biden, and she's female. She's exciting. And, I think she also has a lot of negatives. The Pocahontas thing is going to kill her. She's got an identity crisis there that I think that name stuck, and it cuts and it hurts, and it went viral. She hasn't been able to get over it. There's the phony factor, which is a problem. I don't know if she can play nationally, being a Northeastern liberal. I don't know if she plays in a North Carolina or an Arizona or a place like that.
She's from
She's
Oklahoma,
got absolutely no Wall Street support. And as a Democrat, I know you play footsie with Wall Street. You want to bash them, out in public, but then behind the scenes, you want to ask for their money and grovel. But Wall Street hates her. I don't think they're going to pay her a lot of money during the campaign. And she's open borders. She's pro-tax hikes. So, I don't know how she's going to play.
I'm not.
He's read the file.
He might, but I was surprised.
I created the file.
But is that right? They pay the Republicans? You want them to pay the Democrats?
I'm saying she's not going to get a lot of Wall Street donations compared to some other Democrat like Obama, who talked a big game about cracking down on Wall Street, and they did absolutely nothing.
Okay, Katie, who is your pick for the Democratic nomination?
Oh, I'm not going to pick someone, but if they want Elizabeth Warren to run, first of all, she was wearing sandals in that picture. And if you're going to run a marathon like a presidential election, you better put some good running shoes on. The second thing is she always acts like she is so pro middle class worker when she is one of the most elitist people that they have in the Senate. She can't relate to anybody. She's similar to Hillary Clinton that way. And when it comes to her policy, she's always talking on the surface level about bringing back middle class jobs, fighting for the little guy, but actually the things that she votes for and supports, like minimum wage hikes and not taking down Dodd-Frank, actually bring robots in to take minimum wage jobs that people can then get into and then build their careers from there. And it actually hurts small businesses that can't get small business loans to further their ambitions. So her policies don't actually match up with her working class rhetoric. And I'm not sure that she has enough intersectionality, just like Joe Biden, to really make it on the far left.
What does that mean, intersection?
It means that she's too white. She's not diverse enough, even though she pretends to be a minority. And so the far left of the party now isn't really going to take someone like that. They need someone with more of those
one group
boxes
that
checked.
we've seen slide a little bit in the Trump universe are white suburban women. I think that they're a little uncomfortable with separating children from parents and the like.
Well, I would say a couple things. It's kind of the tale of two midterms. So you have in the House, the president really needs to try to keep some independence in his corner so that he can help keep the House. But in the Senate, to keep the Senate, he really needs his base to get out and Republicans to turn out. So in some ways, the poll today is not that instructive on that independence. If those women decide not to vote for him in the midterm, then the House might go. But I think also with this one for Democrats going forward, they've learned lessons over and over, and so have Republicans. Voters always want what they can't have. In 2012, Republicans were begging Chris Christie to run. He didn't. He chose to run in 2016, and now his moment has passed. And I think that is the same for Elizabeth Warren, that in 2016, she would have had the whole left wing to herself, and she would have eclipsed Bernie Sanders. But she decided to endorse Hillary Clinton, and now there's so much energy and so much attention on the left that her time has probably passed.
You really think so, Greg?
Well, I think you neglected to point out that New York Magazine, that's their comedy issue.
Oh,
they hired
once a year.
Once a year they do it. They had all the stuff written by the morons at Time Magazine, and that's what they got. This is why the focus is going to be on ousting Trump because they've got nothing to beat him with but himself. And so that's why they've been shouting about impeachment. It's like they'd rather than compete against Trump, they'd rather like flip the board over, turn it over because he's beating them in Monopoly.
This is so true.
Yeah.
He will make it a choice, not a referendum.
Yeah.
And he'll say, like, you could have a sitting president who's overseeing a roaring economy.
Yeah.
Or you could have somebody who believes in socialism.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes, exactly. So as long as the economy does well, they're screwed. And Comey actually said something right. He told the Democrats, you got to get a grip, right? You don't be so crazy because at the pace of this demonization, they demonize it's incredible. Every day it gets worse. The Dems will be no different than like the drug-addled maniac on the street corner who's shouting that asteroids are coming and he forgot to wear his pants.
You mentioned something about the economy and doing well. I had a buddy who was out at the Four Seasons brunch in Beverly Hills and ran into...
I said white working class.
And, well, funny that you mentioned that one. Guess who we ran into? Maxine Waters at the $100 a head brunch at the Four Seasons. And he was talking to her for a while. I could.
A lot of brunch.
And she admitted to him that Trump will win in 2020 because the economy will be so good.
Who said that?
Maxine Waters.
That's a scoop.
That is.
That's a scoop.
All right,
News
well,
right now, it's happening, breaking. Jesse's got it.
Yeah, and you guys believe it. Comedian Michelle Wolf, hot water for her again, this time for comparing ICE agents to ISIS terrorists. The video, amazing, coming up on The Five.
Liberty Mutual.
Hollywood continues to lash out against President Trump and his administration. Comedian Chelsea Handler once again going after the president.
My fantasy is to see Donald Trump dragged out of the White House in his boxer shorts, with his, little hair.
No, Chelsea, no.
and landing in the Rose Garden. You know what I mean? I want him naked and humiliated.
Yeah, hilarious. And Michelle Wolf making an outrageous comparison between ICE and terrorists.
It's popular nowadays to say ICE is bad, but there's no better representation of American values right now than ISIS.
ICE is waging war for everything that's holy in this country. I guess you could call it a holy war.
Take it from me. No organization is better than ISIS.
ISIS!
Okay, I don't think that's funny at all. Greg, will this work with a certain segment of people?
Michelle Wolf right now is in a lot of hot water comparing ICE to ISIS because they feel that it insulted ISIS. I guess this is what time does. That these people forget the journalists and the innocent people whose heads were cut off, and that's what we dealt with for 4 years. Yep. While here, I mean, we were sitting here at this table to have to go through it was horrible. We don't think about that much anymore, and we should. Right now, Trump is a character in their movie. He's a bad character. He's not just wrong. He's evil. Can never quote Krauthammer enough. He always said the difference between the left and the right is we think they're misguided or stupid, but they think we're evil.
Katie, what do you think about that in terms of reaching a younger demographic?
I think it's just really unfortunate and disgusting. There are good men and women working in ICE every single day who are just trying to feed their families and keep the country safe. And if people like Michelle Wolf and her Hollywood friends like Chelsea Handler would spend an ounce of the energy they spend demonizing good people in America as, demonizing people who are hurting other people, real rapists, real child traffickers, real terrorists, you might actually get somewhere. And to reiterate Greg's point, we still have men and women in Afghanistan who are still dying as a result of us being there to stop ISIS. We still have a presence in Iraq and Syria as a result of this because those people are there to make sure that we are not hurt here at home. And so reaching, I guess I would be in the younger demographic. It doesn't sit well with me. I don't think it's funny, first of all. So if this is supposed to be comedy, they need to work on it. But just overall, the dehumanization of good people who are literally putting their lives on the line every single day so that people like Michelle Wolf and Chelsea Handler can live in their own elitist bubble every single day, I just think is pretty disgusting.
It's not like there isn't other things for them to make fun of, Jesse.
Oh, there's so much to make fun of.
Jesse's hair?
Not that. I just want to know, how did Rove get on a panel with Chelsea Handler?
Well,
I mean, what has happened to Karl Rove?
That's that thing where they tried. It's called Aussie Fest, right?
Okay.
And that's that thing where they try to get a bunch of different people, and the goal is to get a whole bunch of different people together to show that
they're the complete opposites. I'm not sure they did agree, so I don't know what came
Karl
of that.
didn't look like he was very comfortable.
No, it was weird that she said she wanted to see the president naked. I found that odd. The whole abolish ICE thing, I think the Democrats are just abolishing their chances of winning in the midterms. This happened back during the Iraq War when they attacked our troops. That hurt them politically.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, the Democrats went after police very hard. I think that hurt them politically. And they're just walking into another brick wall with this anti-ICE stuff. And it's really so far out of the mainstream of American society. I can't believe they don't even see it.
Boy, you guys are out of touch.
Really?
Yeah,
tell me.
I thought it was a white working class American.
I wonder that. I know that it offends me. That's why I was sort of asking. Does it work for other audiences?
I think it does. I think that you have to understand that people who see children being separated from their parents, people who are trying to do their jobs and see, gardeners being raided and pushed out because, you look like you're Hispanic. People feel like they're being terrorized. But the larger point is this is not an attack on the men and women who work for ICE. This is an attack on the people who have made ICE into a deportation force, who have made ICE into suddenly, I'm reminded of what people in the right used to say about ATF, jackbooted thugs coming to grab your guns. This is the way lots of people in the Latino, but in the immigrant community.
You agree
on the whole
comparing
feel.
them to ISIS terrorists is a step too far?
No, I said they feel like terrorists, but I'm telling you, this is not an attack on the people.
So you're okay with that analogy?
Is ICE cutting people's heads off, Juan?
How is it not an attack?
It's not an attack on the people. It's an attack on the policy, Greg. The policy that would use them in this way to separate children
people.
from
They
mothers.
compared them to ISIS. They actually.
The idea is, this is what Michelle Wolf got into trouble with at the Correspondence Dinner.
Yeah.
She's being edgy. And I think she has every right to be edgy, but a lot of people are uncomfortable, especially, guess what, the people who are being zinged by her humor.
But it's like when Comey says they need to get a grip. I think this is part. It's not going to win back white working class voters.
I don't know about
Let him
that,
do
but
it.
I think it's not going to work. It is going to excite people who are angry.
ICE agents are working class voters.
We almost had a bleepable moment. All right, our bucket list facing a midlife crisis. Why the popular life planning tool may be flatlining. Next.
Sometimes you just don't know when that's gonna be. Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is
Great song.
Well, it seems like almost everyone has a list of dreams they'd like to fulfill before they die. Perhaps swimming with sharks, one of mine, or going on an African safari, also one of mine, or even jumping out of a plane, just like I did right there. But is it time to kick the bucket list? An op-ed in the Wall Street Journal argues that these lists serve as a shortcut and cheap substitutes for not being more adventurous earlier in life. So Dana, this author, Joe.
It goes to me because I'm so young.
Well, but
you're so
can't you have a
dangerous.
bucket list throughout your life? Like, I don't see that as like an end of life thing where you're like, I'm gonna die and now I have to check off these 10 things because
I think that becomes like a lot of pressure for them to think about all the things you want to do before you die, like of the bucket list thing. I think it's like a kind of interesting concept. I think older people are doing it now because their path was to work really hard in their 20s, and they did things in this order, like school, marriage, job,
kids.
Kids, and then college, and then retirement, and they can do these things. And I think that it's kind of flipped now.
Yeah.
Like younger people want to have these experiences now, and it's like they're delaying things until they get to have their gap years or things like that.
I think experiences are also more accessible now, Juan, with the things that we have available in the world, could be just because of the way that the economies have worked and improved.
Yeah, so I think this was a Joe Queenan piece in the Saturday Journal, and what struck me about it was that at some point he says, enough with bucket lists. Let's move on. If you really want to do something like, that's different, go help somebody, go volunteer, go actually make a difference in the world. And I was struck by that. I thought that's a pretty powerful message.
But Greg, isn't this something that you would have written?
Yes.
Well, I pitched it, actually.
Absolutely. Joe Queenan is almost always right. And I could tell you as a writer and a journalist in men's magazines, the bucket list was never really a thing. No one ever made a list. This was a device created for freelance writers to write adventure and travel pieces for magazines like ARP or Men's Journal or Men's Life. It was just a way to make money. So they go, let's do something on bucket list. Oh, that means I can go do Outward Bound in Colorado. I can go climb Everest. I have what I call the reverse bucket list, in which I'm trying to remove stupid behavior from my past.
It's like
I don't want to add things. I want to remove things.
But it's like the bucket has no bottom if you are one of those journalists.
Yes.
Kind of smart.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have a starting point, right, Jesse? I mean, I'm sure your bucket list started in the womb, and you can see all these amazing things happening in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of crazy, dangerous experiences growing up, and now I want to avoid them. I don't want to swim with sharks. I don't want to skydive. I don't want to run with the bulls. I don't want to do any of that. I want to sit on the beach
really lame.
with a drink and relax.
Exactly.
That's all I want to do.
But what about the accusation in this essay that if you have a bucket list of adventure, it's just basically a pathetic way of compensating for things you have not done earlier?
I think it's for boring people that want to not be boring. And then tell everybody all these crazy things they did.
I think that there are people out there who worked really, really hard. They put their kids through college. Maybe they helped their parents at their end of life, and now they have some time and they want to do some things while they're still healthy enough to do them, so they create this bucket list.
By the way, have you been to the beach this summer? You see all these like older people with tattoos.
Oh, no. It is absolutely amazing. It is. I was in Hawaii. Everybody has tattoos.
Like
this is now now the minority. You don't have tattoos.
So I think that is part of the bucket list. I think they're like, somebody hits 70, so you know what, I'm getting that.
I always wanted that bucket list.
Tattoos do not look good.
I didn't want to say it.
His dad always wanted to have an earring and couldn't because of the place he worked, and so now he has one.
Are these fresh tattoos or are these older tattoos?
Well, I'm not getting into it.
No, you know what?
I think you need to-
You know what? A lot of tattoos are just bad tattoos. A lot of people get bad tattoos.
Yeah, like Hillary 2016.
So, Katie, let you have to answer the question. Why are you jumping out of airplanes?
Because it's fun. It's not just a bucket list thing, because why not? Life is too short. YOLO, that's the millennials.
Yeah, it was almost too short because she forgot to
I was
pull
about
the
to say.
I almost had a short life because I did a photo shoot, but it wasn't my job. It was only a suggestion. One more thing is up next.
I want to get away. I want to fly away. Yeah.
I've always
Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is
Great song.
Well, it seems like almost everyone has a list of dreams they'd like to fulfill before they die. Perhaps swimming with sharks, one of mine, or going on an African safari, also one of mine, or even jumping out of a plane, just like I did right there. But is it time to kick the bucket list? An op-ed in the Wall Street Journal argues that these lists serve as a shortcut and cheap substitutes for not being more adventurous earlier in life. So, Dana, this author, Joe.
It goes to me because I'm so young.
Well, but
you're so
can't you have a
dangerous.
bucket list throughout your life? Like, I don't see that as like an end of life thing where you're like, I'm gonna die and now I have to check off these 10 things because
No, I think that becomes like a lot of pressure for them to think about all the things you want to do before you die, like of the bucket list thing. I think it's like a kind of interesting concept. I think older people are doing it now because their path was to work really hard in their 20s, and they did things in this order, like school, marriage, job,
kids.
Yes, kids, and then college, and then retirement, and they can do these things. And I think that it's kind of flipped now.
Yeah.
Like younger people want to have these experiences now, and it's like they're delaying things until they get to have their gap years or things like that.
I think experiences are also more accessible now, Juan, with the things that we have available in the world, could be just because of the way that the economies have worked and improved.
Yeah, so I think this was a Joe Queenan piece in the Saturday Journal, and what struck me about it was that at some point he says, enough with bucket lists. I mean, let's move on. If you really want to do something like, that's different, go help somebody, go volunteer, go actually make a difference in the world. And I was struck by that. I thought that's a pretty powerful message.
But Greg, isn't this something that you would have written?
Yes.
Well, I pitched it, actually.
Absolutely. Joe Queenan is almost always right. And I could tell you as a writer and a journalist in men's magazines, the bucket list was never really a thing. No one ever made a list. This was a device created for freelance writers to write adventure and travel pieces for magazines like ARP or Men's Journal or Men's Life. It was just a way to make money. So they go, oh, let's do something on bucket list. Oh, that means I can go do Outward Bound in Colorado. I can go climb Everest. I have what I call the reverse bucket list, in which I'm trying to remove stupid behavior from my past.
It's like a
I don't want to
bottomless
add
bucket.
things. I want to remove things.
But it's like the bucket has no bottom if you are one of those journalists.
Yes.
Kind of smart.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have a starting point, right, Jesse? I mean, I'm sure your bucket list started in the womb, and you can see all these amazing things happening in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of crazy, dangerous experiences growing up, and now I want to avoid them. I don't want to swim with sharks. I don't want to skydive. I don't want to run with the bulls. I don't want to do any of that. I want to sit on the beach
really lame.
with a drink and relax.
Exactly.
That's all I want to do.
But what about the accusation in this essay that if you have a bucket list of adventure, it's just basically a pathetic way of compensating for things you have not done earlier?
I think it's for boring people that want to not be boring. And then tell everybody all these crazy
I
things
disagree.
they did.
I think that there are people out there who worked really, really hard. They put their kids through college. Maybe they helped their parents at their end of life, and now they have some time and they want to do some things while they're still healthy enough to do them, so they create this bucket list.
By the way, have you been to the beach this summer? You see all these like older people with tattoos.
Oh, no. It is absolutely amazing. It is. I was in Hawaii. Everybody has tattoos.
Like
this is now now the minority. You don't have tattoos.
So I think that is part of the bucket list. I think they're like, somebody hits 70, so you know what, I'm getting that.
I always wanted that bucket
tattoos
list.
do not look good.
I didn't want to say it, but
His dad always wanted to have an earring and couldn't because of the place he worked, and so now he has one.
Are these fresh tattoos or are these older tattoos?
Well, I'm not getting into it.
No, you know what?
I think you need to-
You know what? A lot of tattoos are just bad tattoos. A lot of people get bad tattoos.
Yeah, like Hillary 2016.
So Katie, let you have to answer the question. Why are you jumping out of airplanes?
Because it's fun. It's not just a bucket list thing, because why not? Life is too short. YOLO, that's the millennial.
Yeah, it was almost too short because she forgot to
I was
pull
about
the
to say.
I almost had a short life because I did a photo shoot, but it wasn't my job. It was only a suggestion. One more thing is up next.